AI is not conscious. There's no evidence that that is even possible. The biggest existential threat that humans have from AI are humans, uh, where people use tools like AI in nefarious purposes.
Thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of National Champion Radio. Today we welcome Kerrie Holley, a trailblazing software engineer, inventor, and technology executive whose work has profoundly influenced the landscape of enterprise computing and artificial intelligence. Kerrie made history at IBM as the company's first Black distinguished engineer, later achieving the prestigious title of IBM Fellow in 2006, the highest technical honor bestowed by the company. His pioneering contributions to service-oriented architecture have been instrumental in shaping the
There's not a Fortune 500 company in the world that doesn't use that invention.
Wow.
During that period, I traveled almost every country in the world doing training, meeting with CEOs, CTOs, CIO.
Wow, that must have been the adventure of a lifetime.
It
You're
was.
just traveling the world, put your own invention into all these businesses. In recognition of this groundbreaking work, Kerrie was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2025. Join us as we dive into Kerrie's remarkable journey, from his formative years on Chicago's South Side to his influential roles at IBM, Cisco, and Google. And with that, we are very honored to welcome Kerrie Holley to National Champion Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Andre. Thank you for having me, and it's absolutely my pleasure.
So I wanted to start with asking about your elevator pitch.
Yes.
Who are you? That's something that you stress, that they should be ready for that. If they meet the CEO of their company in the elevator, they should be ready, and it shouldn't just be, well, I'm a software engineer. So I gave an intro, but you could probably state better, or how do you state it nowadays, who you are?
Well, my elevator pitch has changed a bit since I retired from full-time corporate work, shall we say. And so now when people ask what I do, who I am, I describe myself as a author, as a tech exec, as a software engineer, and someone who is also a speaker, and someone with a JD, and someone who is able to engage at the technology level, both with the CEO and with the practitioner.
Wow. So yeah, that's the kind of blueprint right there. Why do people need to have a better outline of that? Why do so many people miss that? A lot of your work with, or of course, going to get into service oriented architecture, and
Yes.
why you were inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. But a lot of what I saw and looking into your work had to do with personal development, leadership, mentorship. Why are so many people? Why is that so important for people to know that about themselves, have that kind of self awareness, ask people around them? Why was that something you stressed? It seems obvious, but so many people miss it.
Well, I think, especially for minorities, I think being a self-promoter is how some would describe it. Talking about yourself is something that a lot of people are not comfortable with. And often we describe ourselves based on a job position versus what we actually do. So I think one of the things I stressed, which maybe you saw before in one of the talks I've done, is yeah, you're a software engineer, but if the CEO of your company and you happen to be in the elevator at the same time, that doesn't really tell the CEO what you do or what your contributions are. So my point was that by thinking about your contributions and being able to articulate them in, let's say, 60 seconds or less, you probably have 20, 30 seconds, you actually begin to understand what you bring to the table. You begin to define yourself in a way that's powerful. So I think being able to define your own elevator pitch also begins to define your aspirations and your, where you want to be and what you've actually accomplished today.
Yeah, and so having that vision of yourself is something you should always have handy, right? Like,
Exactly. I mean, this is an old concept. It's decades old, this whole concept of branding yourself, but that's what it's all about is really, and that brand can change over time. But having a brand is important.
yeah, for sure. So when you think about, you know, people and you make that great impression on that CEO and they remember you, all of a sudden it's not that you just can say, I know the CEO, is that you can say, the CEO knows me.
Exactly.
And
And that's important that it's who knows you versus who you know.
yeah, that's something that of course, that was a segue. This is not original thoughts whatsoever. This is all you. I was teeing you up there for, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that's something that people don't think about. And that's another, that lends itself to another question. But I think that maybe that concept can be something that people can start to think about first. And that's about self promotion, putting yourself out there, and being thoughtful in who you are. And you shouldn't leave the house without your wallet, your phone, and also a concept of who you are, right? So
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I think you summed it up well. You shouldn't leave the house without the that knowledge. You know, one of the learnings I had as an executive is, and it's there's been layoffs, staff reductions for decades in our country. And one of the things I observed being someone who was sitting around the table as these decisions were being made was that many of the people that were subject to these actions were because the executive team that was making the decisions didn't know them. So, and that's not exclusively true, but it was a good observation. There's observation I made that it was important that people knew who you were and what contributions you were making. And that's not blowing your horn. It's really just, in some cases, it's doing blogging. In some cases, it's writing papers. In other cases, it's doing presentations. It's really putting yourself out there so that your contributions have an impact. It's not showing off your contributions. It's making your contributions have an impact on the company and industry that you partake in.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, marketing is so important. If you're making a Lamborghini in a garage, it doesn't matter. You
Yeah,
got to tell somebody about the Lamborghini and let them appreciate it. And like you said, if it's good work, it's only going to have more impact.
exactly, exactly.
You're not tooting a broken horn, right? You're just tooting something that's useful, and getting that knowledge out there. That kind of leads me into the idea of mastery. I know you could ask certain people about what you might get out of a university, or what you might get out of a certain business or a certain career field, etc. I heard somebody say, Patrick Bet David actually was like, if I had my kid go to college, I would teach him to find the last names of everybody in the class who are the most rich and powerful, and you go after those people and you try to get in with them, and you build that relationship with these future power brokers, let's call it. And it seems like, regardless of the utility of that approach, some big part that's missing is just the idea of mastery and how important over time mastery becomes. So maybe you can talk about mastery, and why you call it your most important currency.
Yeah, you've hit upon a couple of things there. I'd like to comment on both, but in terms of mastery, I think that for a lot of us who want to excel at and do excel at what we do, your ability to master what you've chosen to be your life's work, or at least over some period of time, is just critical. So if you are an aerospace engineer, if you're a doctor, if you're a software engineer, you really need to get good at your craft. And there's only one way to do that, and that's to practice it and to
Yeah.
spend the time. So hopefully you enjoy it and you love it. Um, the university is a wonderful place, and it's especially true today to begin the foundational work in your craft. When I was came out of the university, it was expected because the computer industry was relatively new and young at that time. It was expected that the company would train you, and today you're expected to come in, hit the ground because it's expected that that training came out of the university. So, I have two adult sons, and I told them from day one before they entered the university, your real challenge at the university is to find something you enjoy and to just be good at it. And they both achieved that goal. I've never been a big fan of this concept of networking and trying to meet the most powerful. I think that from the experiences I've had and the people I've known who've been highly successful, it's really shared collaboration. It's working on projects, and certainly if you get lucky, and I do think of some of it as luck, to be around people where one of them hits the jackpot, like the Google founders, and you happen to be one of the people who contributed to that. I mean, it's a little bit of luck, but a lot of it is talent. And a lot of
Hmm.
it is mastery because all of the people that were around Sergi and all these other people, they were just very, very talented. So, uh, mastery, I think, is just a foundational attribute that one should have as you proceed.
Yeah. Wow. And so, I mean, what you say you got two sons who are,
I have three actually and a daughter, but only two that are
okay,
adult.
I see. I see. And so what's it like? I mean, having, let's call it millennials or Gen Z children and how they're looking out into the world and, just what's it like being a father to this generation? I mean, we can segue into, the black community at large, but like, I'm curious of your take on that and what that looks like today.
Well, it's definitely different. I have a 27-year-old, a 25-year-old, and someone who just turned 18, and a 12-year-old. So there's sort
Okay.
of a range. It's
I see.
been it's been very enlightening because my 18-year-old is I think he earned about 10K, no 15K, just building games in Roblox. So it's interesting to see that kind of and then there's all these kids which is very tech savvy. I uh, I find myself not as fluent in some of the social media. Well, I'm definitely not as fluent as they are in the social media apps. I still have an edge on them in terms of software development, but it's interesting to. And my 12-year-old, she's I mean, just what they understand and know because of what's available through social media and the internet is just fascinating to me. I wonder how I would have been at that same age with the technology we have today.
Yeah.
I also find that I think I neither of my two older kids went into tech per se. Didn't go into what we often describe as tech. My
Okay.
oldest went into healthcare, works for a genetic uh, company in the healthcare field as a group leader there. My second oldest is in aerospace, so he went to the aerospace route. But my third is looking to go into comp sci, so we'll see how that works out given all the changes in this industry.
Yeah. So I mean, it is. I mean, where are they? Are you out in California? Is that right?
I do. I live just I live about 10 miles north of San Francisco, just across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay, got you. And so they're having quite a different upbringing than you had.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, uh,
They have a much more
in
privileged.
Chicago,
Yeah.
yeah. And so,
I,
I mean, how do you think, from your perspective, over the years? I mean, obviously, I don't know when the last time you been to Chicago or what what's your thoughts
I'm there
overall
almost,
on this,
I'm
but
there almost every year.
okay, okay, got you. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, how have things changed since you were young and growing up? And we can get more into that in a bit. But I'm just curious, firstly, on like this sort of change of the black community over time and where you see the outlook today. I mean, what's the it's hard to give a state of the union or something like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not a monolith. It's so much diversity that comes with it as well. But, are we getting more educated? Are these, is our culture leading us, young people specifically in the right direction? And how, I guess, you running from gangs that, having to go home and gangs are coming at you when you're a student when at DePaul and how that's changed over time and not changed. I'm not sure, so I'm just curious of what you think the outlook is like and what's it like Black America 2025.
Well, I think it's significantly better, but better than what it was may not say a whole lot because there's still a tremendous hill to be climbed. What I observe is that my generation, I turned 70 in September of last year, and so I grew up in a
That's crazy.
generation. It is
So you're
crazy.
part of the anti-aging community thing. You're with Brian Johnson and all those guys or something. You're one of you're in that camp, huh? Or you just got the genes.
Just the genes, and it helps to be
I saw
a
the yoga
person.
too, though. I don't know if that helps. You could tell me,
Oh, the yoga definitely helps,
Yeah,
definitely.
what's the secret? I mean, we could. Yeah, we got to talk about that though. But that's great. You look
I'll come
awesome.
back and talk about that. I do have I think some secrets. Not that they're secrets; they're well known. But my grandmother she grew up in the South, and she was the person who raised me. And I mention her in the context of your question because, and this I think is true of a lot of Black Americans. And when I say Black Americans, I mean people who actually grew up in the United States. And,
Mhm.
and that's important because she grew up in a very hostile environment in the South. And she grew up in an environment that was dangerous. I mean, physically dangerous to her well-being. She was part of the Great Migration. How that affected my generation, and now I'm an old, considered an old generation, is that a lot of people in my generation never grew up with the self-esteem that is necessary for success because it wasn't imprinted, I should say, in them by their parents. And I think that's what significantly changed. I see young people having a lot more pride, not being shameful that they're Black, not because some of that shame is not conscious. It's that you grew up in a poor neighborhood, you grew up with gangs, you grew up with violence, and you begin to, as a kid, you begin to think that's part of your culture when it's not. It's been systematically imposed, but you may not
Mhm.
be aware of that as a 12-year-old. And I think what's changed is that there's a lot of people like you, Andre, young, energetic, bright people of color who are changing the world. And I think there's a ton more of you than there used to be when I grew up. And so I think that's a positive. So that's one of the positive signs I see. I think that
Okay.
we still have systematic issues in our country that uh, disproportionately affect people of color. So that I think, unfortunately, I think is getting worse
Mm.
versus better. And then with our economy today is putting more pressure on people of color as well. So I guess succinctly said, I think that we're a lot better off today than when I was a kid, but
Yeah.
I know that we still have a tremendous amount of hurdles and challenges to overcome. But I'm optimistic. I'm encouraged by seeing uh, just the tremendous amount of pride that people of color have today than what I saw uh, growing up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have this idea about it's better to look forward than to look back.
Yes,
Now, that's it's an idea, it's a thought. I don't know if it's how applicable it goes. Of course, there should be historians. Of course, there should be people. We should understand where we came from. You can't. You're a cultural being nested in reality, so you have to have some sense of your origins and where you came from. I think about my human origins, my Black origins, right? It's
yes,
I'm also, of course, slavery is in my ancestry. Also taming fire, and I think being human once, who knows about the afterlife while you're here. I might as well. So I think about that, but I also think about the future, and I'm like, it's coming so fast. I'm better off if I had known about Bitcoin 10 years ago than to be thinking about reparations or thinking about the past in that way. And so I think about that, and I'm not sure how wise it is or how to strike that balance. I think everybody maybe just has to find their own way to balance it. But it seems that there's so much opportunity, especially for an American, a Black American, coming down at you. There's so many avenues these days to rein in. AI is obviously here, and we're going to talk deeply about that and the opportunities. But I guess it's that idea of how you might want to position your vision best in order to, take advantage of what's coming, but also perhaps to be whole as it's coming to you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the opportunities for everyone are tremendous today. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunities. I suspect it might be more challenging to maybe challenge is not the right word. I think it requires more energy and more fortitude and more vision by people to really see those opportunities and to go after them
Yeah.
because things are not on a silver platter as they might have been when I came out of college. When I came out of the university, there were just tons of jobs. When I came out of the university, there was tons of opportunities to try to balance what had been an unbalanced perspective in terms of giving opportunities to people of color. I think today that's shifted. I don't mean just today, like in 2025 or 24. I think over the last decade,
Hmm.
It's just shifted because of the world labor force and the world economies. And so, because of that, I think you're absolutely right that there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. It's a matter of being able to help people understand that and have them go after it.
Yeah, I've heard people say VC world people, talking about essentially there might be a new paradigm in the way that companies get formed. Instead of 1,000 people working for one company, you have 1,001 person companies, or
Yeah.
with AI. You have so many solopreneurs who are,
Yeah.
doing some of these massive endeavors because of their domain knowledge and then technology. I mean, yeah, I mean, what does the future look like? I guess we can maybe peel it back and think about AI, or well, I know you have plenty in the healthcare and AI. There's so many fun perspectives to think about, but yeah, I'm curious about, I guess, yeah, what do you take about that company formation and how opportunities might change? I even imagine a world where it's mostly just like entrepreneurs, and then VCs are kind of the second layer above it, and they're trying to find these winners, and everybody's essentially forced to get into a startup, or like, I mean, is Facebook and Meta going to keep trimming? Maybe they open up new endeavors in certain pockets or something like that where there's more opportunity for jobs. But it's interesting to think about the future of the labor force.
Yeah, it is. I think that we are, you and I and others are seeing the work being redefined. We're seeing a lot of cognitive work be redefined, and it was not something we would have imagined 20 years ago. I do think with artificial intelligence, specifically the use of large language models, it gives everyone an opportunity to have access to just a vast amount of information, and not just the information, but the analysis of that information. So this notion, I mean, Microsoft calls it a co-pilot, but this notion of having I mean, I've met some people who talk about AI being their co-CEO, their partner. But the point they're making is that today we can use these tools to augment ourselves in a way that we couldn't do 5 years ago. And when I say augment ourselves, not just in terms of generating cool things, but also asking uh, thoughtful questions and being able to tap this sort of intelligence that you wouldn't have otherwise have been able to tap. So, in terms of co-creating, maybe that's too strong a word. I mean, we can get into AI. I'm not a strong believer in sort of what I describe as the mythology of AGI, but we can get into that if you choose later. But the
Sure,
point
yeah,
I'm
sure,
really,
yeah.
but the point I'm making is that there's just what you can do with large language models is very powerful, and I hope that young people are beginning to take advantage not just of its ability to, as I said, do generation, but to actually be a thoughtful consultant, a thoughtful advisor, a thoughtful partner with them as they think about creating new things.
For
And I
sure. I
think that,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I can attest to it as an entrepreneur. I have a film studio, and now I'm running this and have some endeavors for this endeavor, right? And
yeah,
so I can certainly say that it's, you know, uploaded, up leveled me tremendously, and
yeah,
even helping with script writing, helping with, thinking through scripts. It's not the best writer, but you got to be a better prompter. The better writers can make
exactly,
better prompts, and so
exactly.
domain knowledge is key. But even still, sometimes it just annoys me trying to get it to right. I'm like, all right, I've spent 20 minutes trying to get you to say the thing the right way. Why am I not just going ahead and make these sentences work? Like I've spent so much time. Honestly, sometimes I get more out of just figuring out how I want to prompt it to get to the conclusion, to think through it, so that then I can say, well, that's what I want, and I can generate that better than you. Now,
Yeah.
as it ventures over into actually producing film, producing content, that's where I think our industry, well, film specifically, starts to be in danger, or at least needs to think about itself in a different way, because those opportunities for creators are going to change. But yeah, I am curious. Ray Kurzweil, he wouldn't probably agree with you on the AGI. He's been on a long train
He,
of
he definitely wouldn't agree with me. In fact, there's some great thinkers out there, people I respect tremendously, like Ray, uh, Dr. Hinton. There's a
Mhm.
ton of people who have a perspective of AGI that I would argue is not asserted, is not affirmed by facts. And so, I got a paper in progress on this whole topic, but just sort of to summarize it, AGI is, uh, uh, you know, uh, who's the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt? Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah.
he he talks most recently quite elegantly about AGI and what's coming. There's a whole set of extremely bright people in San Francisco who pontificate widely about AGI. There was a New York Times. Uh, Ezra Klein is, do I have his right name? The
Ezra
podcaster.
Klein. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Vox.
Yeah, he wrote a New York Times article. The government knows AGI is coming, and he did a podcast on this. But all of them suffer from several basic challenges. One is that they all argue with the logical fallacy that what I say is true because I'm an expert. And I point that forward because if in fact what you say is true, then you should have a scientific hypothesis. A
Yeah,
scientific hypothesis means that you should have a definition of what AGI is. You should have the ability to prove if it's been achieved, and you should be able to, in your current work, be able to show benchmarks. There should be some public information that helps us understand how you're actually going to achieve what you're achieving.
yeah,
If the public is, as they should be, is impressed with large language models, but at the end of the day, Yuval, the guy who wrote *Sapiens*, another
yeah, yeah.
great
Noah
author,
Harari.
speaker, he, I think his latest
Looking
books
at his back here.
is his latest book is *Nexus*.
Yeah, that's
And
funny. I got that here.
yeah,
Ah, there it is. Now
yeah,
we're plugging Noah.
yeah.
Now
It's
we
a
want to
great
do
book.
to it.
I love his
Do
writing.
it. Yeah.
Uh, but he says in that book, he says that AI is. I'm trying to quote him exactly. Is creating, is solving disease, is inventing. AI has done none of this. There is no example as
Mm,
of this film, as of this video. There's no example of AI creating anything like solving disease,
mm,
inventing solutions. It doesn't. It can't do that. It and to understand why it can't do that is to understand how large language models work. They are statistical modeling. Uh, this is I would do it an injustice if I would just call it math. But at the foundation of what these models do uh, is, you know, anything that involves computing, computers will do better than you and I. And that includes memorization, and that includes regurgitation of
mm-hmm.
what I memorized. And in its simplest form, that's what large language models are doing at a scale never before seen. The ability to take in just the world's data and to be able to analyze it, see patterns that you and I may not have been able to see, and spit that back to us is something
Mm,
we've never seen before. And yes, I would assert that that's a form of artificial intelligence, but that's
mm-hmm.
not what people are describing as AGI.
Yeah.
So it's hard to, Google's wrote a great paper in defining AGI in terms of 5 levels.
Okay.
And what they do in their paper is they say, we're not going to talk about consciousness, because that's what Ray Kurzweil talks about, is the ability for, and that's what Greg Hinton talks about. The problem with that, and that takes us to another space of problem, is that
Mm-hmm.
we can't agree on what consciousness is as a species.
That's right.
So, so we can't agree on it, but yet you're going to say that we're going to maybe someday have silicon be conscious. We don't even know how consciousness originates, period.
Mm-hmm.
But that goes into a different point. But the point about the Google paper is that by taking it off the table, by taking the notion of sentience off the table, you can now have a more science-based discussion. Uh, so that's one point that I'm making, is that I
Yeah.
do think if we define AGI properly, it can be achieved. But if we start talking about it as some kind of uh, that AI is going to be able to establish its own goals, there's no evidence, there's no science, there's no we don't know how to build things that can create their own goals. So when people
Hmm.
say that we do, where's the proof of that?
Yeah.
I mean, when I say proof, I don't mean show me that it's doing it. Show me how we
Yeah.
even know we can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm
I mean, so
and
the
I'm I mean,
go
if you
ahead.
look at the Meta, speak with the Meta CTO, I mean, he will throw shade on this as well. There's just a ton of really bright people who disagree with another ton of bright people.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm simply saying the science is not there to support
Mm.
what some of the folks are talking about with AGI. And if you look at Sam Altman and if you look at some of his most recent definitions, they're also toning back their definitions. But I can achieve anything if I don't define it.
Yeah, for sure. I
If
mean,
if it's a
you
moving
can't
target.
miss a target that's not well defined. I mean, it's hard to miss that one, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I hope anyone's watching this, I hope they understand that I'm a big fan of AGI.
Yeah.
And people will talk about agentic AI and agents and say, well, Kerrie, that's how we get to being able for AI to do things on its own. Well, the problem with that is that no, that's not how we get things done on their own, because agents are still operating as tools built by humans. They're
Yes.
still operating within parameters. We have never seen a computing system, an AI system, whatever you want to call it. We've never seen one that has been able to sit with you, Andre, and say, Andre, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about and we just they don't know how to ask the right questions, which is the key to science, being able to
Hmm.
ask questions that have never been asked before. They don't know how to think the way humans think because they're machines. They're not I just don't have a way of describing it other than the
Yeah.
fact
Yeah.
that
I mean,
the technology is not there today. Will it ever be there? I don't know. I mean, we can look back 10 years from now, and I believe we'll find the merits of my argument are sound, that we still don't have AGI as, let's just take the ex-CEO's definition of AGI on some of his most recent YouTube videos. I would,
Schmidt.
yeah, yes, Eric Schmidt. I was just whatever, but 10 years from now, I think we'll find that what he said today is still not true a decade from now. They're not going to be
Wow. That's
better than
a
they're not going to be better than the best mathematicians. They're not better than the best mathematicians today, contrary to what he says. They're simply
wow.
not. There's math problems I can give them. There's a test by an ex-Google engineer, which is demonstrably proven, in my opinion, others might disagree, that these large language models can't think. They simply are. I mean, he calls them memorization machines, but maybe he's being a
Yeah.
little bit unkind. But the point is that no, they're not better than the great mathematicians today, the great scientists today. They simply aren't.
Got it. So, I mean, generating based on an answer isn't the same as asking the right question. It seems like we
Right.
have to go through consciousness and try to get to the bottom of that in order to even answer it. Because then we'll have these bots that, something like you heard of Truth Terminal? Heard of this
Yep.
from Andreessen? So we'll have bots that could potentially even have something like Truth Terminal inside and start going off and be inside, implanted in like one of their robots or something like this in 5-10 years or something like that, and it's speaking and it's moving and it's doing stuff. But without understanding what consciousness is, it's going to be hard to say that that's what consciousness is or that's not what consciousness is, just because they don't, just because they know they can say that they don't want to be turned off. Even if they try to defend their own ability to be turned off, doesn't mean that that's just something that is actually a provability of their own consciousness.
You're absolutely right. And we I've never seen a scientific paper that's been peer reviewed
Mm-hmm.
that shows how we're going to build with the current technology. I'm not arguing against new inventions, but with the
Yeah,
current technology, exactly how basically does a machine on its own decide to come up with a goal?
yeah, yeah. And it seems like um, the theory now is basically just more compute. Some level of brain neuron firing overlap at a certain scale is going to reach new levels of intelligence, and they keep saying, well, Musk, he built out in Memphis, and it was big supercluster, and the bigger the better, and it'll just somehow be a phenomenon that occurs as a second order
Well,
process of gathering enough connections.
you hit it on the head, and when large language models were first introduced to the public with ChatGPT, there was this
Mm-hmm.
thinking consistent with what you just said that there's these emergent properties of LLMs. And that was proven scientifically to be false. I think it was through a study group by researchers at Apple.
Okay.
LLMs don't have emergent properties. They don't. They do things that we don't expect. That's not emergent. It just means we don't understand how they work.
Yeah.
Uh, Before we had these types of models, we were using and they use this too. They were using a form of machine learning called deep learning. I remember
Mm-hmm.
sitting down with doctors, and they were saying to me, as we were trying to introduce the use of deep learning in healthcare, they were arguing that and asserting that we can't use technology that uses this, Kerrie, because we can't explain its outcomes. And I said to them, well, that's not true. Deep learning is deterministic, and any system that is deterministic can be explained. We just have to show you how to explain it. And we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with large language models, we're not looking at deterministic systems because their outcomes are, to be blunt, not predictable. That's why you see in some cases what people describe as hallucinations, which is a nice way of saying that what was rendered was false, was
Yeah.
incorrect. But the point I'm making is that uh, because you're dealing with just billions of parameters, it's problematic. Let's understand a basic thing about the other problem we have with AGI in terms of how some people are painting it. So if you go and drive a Tesla today, that same Tesla is not AGI, even though it may be a self-driving car, because it's unlikely that that Tesla would operate safely in the streets of London.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we look at the model that Tesla built, that model doesn't sit in the Tesla because the computing required for what it was trained is just too massive. So they have a scaled down model that
Mm-hmm.
is inserted and downloaded on some regular basis in each of these self-driving cars. When you and I use ChatGPT, we're not looking at the model, we're not using the model that ChatGPT has built. We're looking at
Mm-hmm.
a reduced model that allows it to run on these millions of servers across the world.
Got it.
Any other implementation would be too expensive.
Got
You
it.
and I, you and I don't have what's called a training and inference phase. We don't get trained and then have an inference phase that allows us to interact with the world. We do this seamlessly. A 4-year-old does this seamlessly. But large
Mm-hmm.
language models have a training phase, a model is built, then a smaller model is deployed to these millions of instances, which is what you and I are using. So think about how would I have an AI that would run the world? Uh, I mean, how is it physically going to solve the scaling problems of being able to work with millions of computers? I mean, it's a massive technical challenge to do what
Okay.
people are imagining that AGI could eventually do. So what they're trying to portray is that I'll have one model or many models, it doesn't matter, that will have this super intelligence. And
Mm-hmm.
it begs the question as to what intelligence. But again, I go back to what I said is that
Yeah.
intelligence, like consciousness, are not well defined terms. And I'll bet on the computer every time if we measure intelligence by compute.
Yeah.
If that's if that if that's my measurement, how fast it can do math, how quickly it can recall, how quickly it can spot patterns. Yeah, the computer's going to win every time.
Hmm. Yeah, but new questions, new knowledge. I mean that's somewhat. I mean it touches a lot of different things, and one of them to me is like all the data that it is trained on, the copyrights that are coming out of that, people taking cases up against them, saying, hey, because of course you think about old stuff. For some reason, it seems like oh well that's okay, right? It's fair game.
Right.
They did it. It's okay. But then it's like wait, somebody just invented or thought about something and created some new knowledge. Some person did a
Right.
bunch of studies, et cetera, and now there's some new knowledge in the world. And obviously, you'd have to either use the internet through the the large language model, or you'd have to update its entire training because sometimes, oh, I don't know anything past January, bro. That was when I stopped my training, so I don't know anything about unless I look it up on the internet, right? And so you
Right.
think about like this ability to just grab that new knowledge and add it to its awareness base essentially. And it's like, well, that doesn't lend itself in the same way to AGI, in the sense that it can produce this new knowledge and it can just ingest it and have to be trained on it. And, it can just legally, these companies can just grab Kerrie's new, paper that has some new knowledge on how systems can work. And all of a sudden they can say, well, now we can incorporate it. And that was free. And now it's part of a service that somebody's using. That seems
Yeah.
like, okay, wait a minute. There should be some parameters over that. Not only does that have the legal ramifications, it also, to me, has some sort of barrier towards knowledge, the way that it
Yeah.
has to be implanted into it. But it is interesting. I guess, if it's not AGI, the future is still bright and interesting, or are these
Yeah.
hallucinations not going anywhere at the
No, I
foundational
think
level? I mean, we're talking about
I think
AGI, agentic AGI. That's a second layer. But the foundational models, which everybody says is going to go to zero, they're still struggling sometimes. Like I was talking about earlier with, just writing or doing a simple hallucination, right? They still hallucinate. There's holes in the foundation. Are those going to get fixed, you think? I mean, I know Anthropic
I
is doing some work on it.
I think absolutely. I think, and keep in mind, we're only seeing a snippet of what the foundational model can do because we're looking at the deployment of it. We're not looking at the
Right,
actual
right.
genuine model. But there's some real world issues. Einstein and Oppenheimer were credited with doing visual thinking, which meant that they have attributes that silicon doesn't have. They can feel the world, they can see the world, they can experience the world, and then they're mathematical geniuses. Their knowledge of math, their knowledge of physics, you put all that together, and they're able to do something I would assert that we haven't figured out how to get a computer to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because computers don't literally experience the world. They don't have emotions. They don't feel sadness. They don't feel happiness. Uh, and I mentioned that only to mention that, and I know that you have people like Feifei Li, another great computer scientist who are working on spatial intelligence, but they don't have this ability to perceive the world as you and I. And you know, I don't know that much about how Einstein did what he did, but some people credit it to his ability to visually think of something, whether it's through a dream state or otherwise, and then to put the math behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea came first, the math came second.
Yeah. Yeah. And where does that come from? Where's that inspiration, that aha? Where
Exactly.
does that coalescence of, even like the dreams you have that oh my God, that was it, or something like this? It's like, I mean, and it's taken, hundreds of billions of years for this intelligence that we have to get to where it's at. It's still the preeminent machine, but these are very helpful tools. I
Yeah.
guess,
Well, we
people are
also,
saying the bubble will burst.
which bubble is
What do you
that?
think? The AI bubble, like the .com bubble before it, etc. Is this a big old bubble? Have these things actually shown the use cases and the value prop underneath it all, like that they're
I
claiming, or
think,
is it as much as they spent on it, etc.?
well, I don't think it's achieved its ROI to date. But I do think that as a knowledge tool, it's proven its worth. I know some CEOs who are using it extensively to augment their cognitive skills. So I think from that standpoint, and we know the public at large is doing that. So from that standpoint, I think it's been a success and the ROI has been achieved. I think when we look at the major corporations of the world and ask ourselves how much are they doing with this, I think from that vantage point, it has not been a success right now. I think if
Mhm.
you ask Satya of Microsoft, who I believe is partnered with OpenAI. I believe
Mhm.
OpenAI uses the Microsoft infrastructure to
Yeah.
power its
Yeah.
chat
Azure.
GPT.
Azure.
But I mention that because I think there was a written statement in December of 2024 where Sam and Satya said that we'll see AGI when it produces X billions of profit. Uh, but the point I'm making is that no, I don't think the ROI has been achieved from a profit standpoint. I don't know of any major enterprise that would say, I know there's a lot of small companies that say they're reducing their workforce, and then you see a lot of companies like Meta and Google who are reducing their workforce. But I don't know if they're reducing their workforce because of AI doing jobs or because they need to reinvest their money into building more infrastructure. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know that a lot of jobs that we have today, and a lot of programming jobs that we have today, uh, arguably were artificially created. We didn't, they're not people who are, a lot of people who are writing some code, who are doing some activities. These were not brain surgeon coding activities. So yes, large language models will replace them.
Yeah.
So I think unfortunately, there's a lot of jobs that will fall into that bucket
Mhm.
that they can be replaced because of the proper use of these tools. But to answer your basic question, I think the ROI will come. I hope it comes before we have a bubble. I worry about the promises that some people are making that I don't think they'll be able to keep. But at the same time, if I look at people like Sam Altman and their promises, I think they're balancing them. I don't think they're over promising. Their definitions of AGI are scaling back. I think if you look at Metas, they've always been rather balanced. I think if you look at Google, they're very balanced. So I do think that we have a lot of upside. So I wouldn't bet against AI at this point in time. So I don't see a winter as some have called them in the past. I
I
don't
see.
see an AI winter over the next few years.
So I mean, let's get into why you won. I like to say this is a place where at least people, national champions who come can feel free to speak freely because we really need people like you and other leaders in the national dialogue. I think that's. I mean, there was just a big thing about experts and basically using authority and expertise as a way to say that you should just listen to what we're talking about. And all these podcasters who have a lot of reach but don't have the expertise. And I think if you don't go to one of these, if you don't, I don't know, something in your life should disseminate that. I think for me, I was lucky to go to a good university, and eventually I was like, oh wow, I'm not as smart as I thought, and there's so many wise voices, and so maybe I'll hear a podcaster and I'm like, well, I know 10 professors who are more compelling who don't have a microphone, who don't have a platform, and but that might be the most compelling person that, this person, most Americans have ever heard if they, and so I think that is important that, people who come here feel they can speak freely and try to add your voices to everything that's going on, your leadership, because we need it clearly and with on the nation level. I think it's interesting. I mean, what do you feel about the America in and of itself right now, 2025? Are you concerned about the near term future? There's some technological stuff maybe with China. You may have some experience in how aggressively they're doing their technology. It feels like I'm not sure if AI and COVID is going to teach this next generation, and I think that education is should be akin with national defense. Eventually, these kids, these young people, are going to be creating the future, and that's going to essentially decide the fate of the nation.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the things that give me pause is that, a lot of research. are great universities. And you may have seen the news most recently, which it appears that a lot of those universities are under attack. And
Hmm.
a lot of the research funding, which was by the government, is being cut off. So I do think that has the potential for negative harm in terms of a variety of things, in terms of the research that's needed to stay ahead in the AI arena, the research that's needed to stay ahead in fighting disease and preventing disease. So that does concern me. Hopefully it's temporary and we don't see a lasting negative impact of the drying up of that funding. So, uh, uh, and it concerns me that universities, which I think are places where great ideas are born and flourish, are under attack.
Yeah, that is concerning. This administration has, gone after these universities for certain policies. Me, I think that it for all the things that this. I was having a conversation with a more geopolitical conversation about the United States' posture in these
Mhm.
instances, and I do think underneath some of it is at least the idea of a resilience to be created. Not to say that it's the right thing, but like for example with Europe and pulling out of their support so that they have to fund their own military is only shown to make something like Europe more resilient. Eventually, they're like, okay, well, we have to be better off, or even with us in China, where we say, wait a minute, we can't make this stuff anymore. Like, we can't even make our own medicine or, our own things that are very essential to national security. And so I think that uh, it's exciting, I guess, to watch some of the resilience that I think like Canada. Canada got charged up and suddenly they're awakened like they never were before once Trump started to say certain things, which I think is a good thing for them, instead of being complacent, and I think that's one version of what's come out of this.
Yeah, this is stepping out of my area of expertise, but what concerns me is the U.S. dollar has been the world's currency for decades, and it's the world currency because the world trusts the stability of the U.S.
Yeah,
So I think that's at risk.
that's
Uh,
very scary. So to your area of expertise,
yes,
service oriented architecture.
yes,
You
service architecture.
how did this idea come to mind? And what made you go file the patent for it? Now you've won you've been inducted, I should say, into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. There's going to be a ceremony soon, probably this
Next
summer
next week.
coming up or something.
Next
Next
week.
week, a week from now. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So that sounds very exciting. It's going to be a cool induction ceremony. By the time
Yes.
this drops, it'll have happened. So we'll have some footage from it. You've had a great time, as we can see in this video. Look at you there giving your speech. It looks awesome. So, how did this idea come to mind? What made you go file the patent and know that this was, something I need to go file? This is a unique invention. What is it, and why has it been regarded so highly?
So great question, by the way. And I joined IBM in 1986. I mention that because the first project I was assigned to was as an architect, a system architect on a project we were doing for a big bank. This bank. Uh, well, it can be named Wells Fargo Bank. Had just acquired Crocker Bank in San Francisco, and they had a huge project that they needed to get underway to rewrite their banking system. This was basically their teller system and their sales platform. So the teller
Okay.
system, we all know what that is. You go into a bank at the time, and remember this was '86. Uh, Online banking is not in full steam at that point. So a lot of people are doing their banking in a bank and using tellers. And they have salespeople who are trying to sell you their products at the same time. So IBM had just won a huge sale of a lot of new equipment. And so it was May of '86. They needed this new system up and operational. I think it was by November of that same year. So
Okay. Wow.
a lot of people said it was impossible. Uh, uh, I said, no, we can do this. And so The IBM company said, go for it, Kerrie. And I had a team of about 50, 70 people reporting to me and I was writing code, I was doing design, I was doing architecture. I give you that background because we were highly successful. But later in that same year, the vice chairman of the bank at the time, and a vice chairman is a pretty high level position. He calls the IBM sales rep and me into his office, and he starts the conversation by saying, "Kerrie, we have a problem. You built a great system. It's so good that everybody wants a piece of it. The problem is that they have to sit in a queue and wait for you to build them new features. That doesn't scale, Kerrie.
Mm.
I need you to fix this." So, I go back home that evening and I'm thinking, I don't know how to solve this. you know, to, it's just not something that the industry has solved before. And the concept of service-oriented architecture pre-existed me, but it was not a well-known nor a concept that had been hardened into code,
Hmm.
hardened into methods, hardened into techniques, hardened into tools. So it was a concept.
Theoretical.
Yes, with some ideas on what it meant. So yes. So what I did and a team is we said and this was coincidental with another technology that was booming at the time called web services. So we said, why don't we build some tooling, some methods, and some techniques, and tell people how to actually make service-oriented architecture work at an enterprise scale. So a
Mm.
lot of the patents, there were several patents that I had the opportunity to file under SOA. So the invention that the National Inventors Hall of Fame is recognizing one of many patents.
Okay, got it.
But the point I'm making is that that's how the concept, or rather the idea of patents and SOA came about, is because I saw for the first time, I had an executive present me with a challenge, and then I saw an opportunity when web services, so web services as a technology was something that Microsoft had coined, but basically it allowed two pieces of software to communicate over the internet through what was called a web service. So instead of having these hard coded, which had to be redone each time, we could plug and play as we saw fit with this interoperability of technology called web services. So what we did with SOA is we said, well, what if we could build software the same way kids build Lego blocks? Because that was the problem that the vice chairman was asking us for. He wanted a new Lego block to be used outside of retail banking to do something called, let's say, balance inquiry.
Mm.
So instead of having to use an application where all these blocks were tightly bundled and I had to go through the application, I could just peel a block off and anybody could access that block called balance inquiry and do a
Mm.
balance inquiry of your account.
Okay.
So the idea was to create an architecture, an application of services that could be deassembled, reassembled as you saw fit without great expense. Because that was the
Mm.
problem of software development up to that point. When you built these enterprise, and these were non-consumer apps, when you built these enterprise applications, every time you wanted to change them, you had to go back into this monolithic code base, and that just created lots of challenges in terms of, okay, where do I change it in the code base? Uh, okay, I've got more breaks, more bugs that have been introduced. It just was problematic in terms of first figuring out where to put the change. Secondly, what do I have to rewrite in order for this change to be accommodated? So a lot of these were fixed by saying we're gonna define an application as a set of services. And so
Okay.
service architecture meant that the application was basically a collection of services that talk to each other through something called an application programming interface, an API. So
Mm,
each service talk to another service through an API, and very often the technology to invoke that API would be something called a web service. So
wow.
the concept and the idea came to me from problem that was presented to in that first project. And then, to be blunt, it took almost a decade later for us to instantiate those concepts into because the web services had to get invented and introduced and
Wow.
other technologies. So it took some time for us to put the puzzle together. And
Wow. So, oh,
no, I was just going to say, so and I obviously had help from colleagues who we worked as a team. I happened to be the chief architect, and so the National Inventors Hall of Fame. A lot of the inventions that you'll see that come out of there are very consumer centric. This invention, I believe, got credit for induction, and me particularly, because of the worldwide impact it had, not on consumers directly, but on enterprises. There's not a Fortune 500 company in the world that doesn't use that invention. There's
wow.
not so that during that period I traveled probably to every country, not every, but almost every country in the world doing training, meeting with CEOs, CTOs, CIOs. So we had a full court press on introducing this technology. We embedded it in the IBM tool suite, which at that time was Rational's software suite. And so
Hmm.
it had a profound impact corporate uh, on the corporate world across the United States. I think I was going to London every month, talking to every bank, going to Australia, talking to
Wow.
every, they had far fewer banks, going to Japan, China. So it had far reaching implications to help corporations and their leaders understand what it was and how to apply it. I even went to Russia to talk about this. So it was all over the world.
Wow. That must have been the adventure of a lifetime. I mean, that's,
It
I mean,
was.
you're just traveling the world and then you have to put your own invention into all these businesses and you're new to all of them. You're setting the world. You are the bleeding edge. I mean,
And you had a lot of disbelievers. Some people, "Well, how does this work? Isn't this the same as this?" And and as I said, we in the
you have
IBM
a
company,
translator?
the answer is no. Fortunately, English then and now continues to be the universal language of business.
I see. That helps. That helps. And
Yes,
so on a high level with the say that first bank, you have a certain amount of services that you're gonna allow them to do, right? Whether it's checking my balance or it's something else, right? There's a suite of services that this bank can now do in a digital interface. Is that a way to
that's
say it in the first step?
yeah, yep.
And then I'm gonna somehow make it to where any bank can drag and drop, choose and pick certain services that they want to allow in their digital suite. Is that right?
That's right.
And I
Yeah.
have to make it universal because maybe there's different, this is the interoperability part where it has to speak to different maybe tools that they're already using or yeah, something is different at each bank or at each place where this invention is so universal that it can be implemented everywhere. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, to give you another example, just to be clear, we weren't, remember the invention occurred after my project at Wells Fargo, so they didn't get the full advantage of the invention until later.
Got it.
But I remember this one financial company that, again, I was the chief architect for. And again, SOA was an integral technology architecture to be deployed. But this gets a little bit more detailed. One of the other inventions that a colleague and I did was we created a maturity model to
Okay.
say that you could be at SOA levels 1 through 7.
Okay.
And at a certain level, which was level 5 of this maturity model, that gave you the almost the full benefit of future proofing your system. future proofing, meaning that if a market condition came along, I wouldn't have to rewrite my application to deal with that new market condition. I would be able to, as you described, have both services that were externally available and some that were only internally available. So
Hmm.
I remember we built the system successfully. I'm in Mexico City, I think, or maybe I was in Guadalajara, but I was in one of those two places at the time when I get a call from my boss saying, "Hey, Kerrie, that system you built 2 years ago that's supposed to be future proof? They're calling me up saying it's not, and they want you, in their office on Monday, ASAP."
Oh my goodness. So
So
some new market condition happened, and they said we can't adapt to it.
that's right, that's right, without spending $50 million.
Got it. Yeah. It's
So,
supposed to
so
be just like this. What happened?
yeah,
So oh
exactly.
wow, that's a call to get. You're trying
That's a
to
call
enjoy
today.
Mexico.
Yeah. So, fortunately, I was at the airport on my way home. So I arrive in the office on Monday. I get a quick debrief before I go and meet with the client, and now I'm fully armed and ready. So I sit down with him and I say, well, I really empathize with the problem you're experiencing, but let's take a step back and see what architectural decision we made 2 years ago. And I show them the paperwork, the architectural decision, and I said, remember, you guys didn't want to pay for level 5.
You didn't want to get the five.
You wanted 4 because you said that was good enough.
Hmm.
And I told you, which is written right here, what the implications would be of that decision. You chose 4, and that's what you've got. And the story is worse because your guys didn't even maintain the services we built.
Mm. Mm. Of
So,
course, they would be the ones complaining too, right?
yeah,
Get in my
yeah.
office. Yeah, yeah, of course.
So we
And
had a
so maybe, oh,
we had a great. I mean, it was I showed the right empathy, but the point is that it doesn't come magically. You have to build it. You have to design it up front.
got it.
To get the full flexibility of a Lego block kind of metaphor.
Yeah, yeah. What's an example of maybe a market condition that somebody might want to adapt to? That, and then how does a level five allow them to make the switch quickly, but a level four doesn't?
Well, let's say I'm a credit card company, and let's just say, for purposes of discussion, that I happen to process Discover cards.
Okay.
And let's say a market condition changes. Actually, let's pick a better example. Let's say I'm a company called Visa. And let's say at the time I'm not a publicly held company. I'm a
Okay.
privately held company, which is factually true at one point in time. And the
Got it.
only cards I process are Visa. And then the market changes because I want to become a publicly held company. I also want to, as a publicly held company, is to allow some of my applications, like a dispute application, when you call up your credit card company and want to dispute a charge. I want to be able to handle cards outside of Visa. I want to be able to handle MasterCard disputes because I let them come through my network as well. That's a
Mm.
market change. Two changes. I'm handling a different type of credit card and I'm a public company. So now my dispute application has to accommodate something it never planned for before, which is to handle disputes from two different origins. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So now my coder tech person has to go in there and change the code from the bottom up so that
Yep,
it can accommodate all these new phenomena, these new conditions on the field.
that's right. And if I haven't built my the right services, I basically have to build a bunch of new services, and then I also have to change the old services. And suddenly, what should have been maybe $1 million change is a $50 million change.
Hmm. The cascading effect of that
Cascading
has a
effect.
lot of implications.
Yeah, because 2 years ago you never anticipated going public. 2 years ago you never anticipated accommodating a second credit card type.
So how can SOA accommodate this $50 million change if say they're on level five?
Well, on level 5, we agree that services will be externally and internally accessible the same way. So now, if I build a service, a third party like a company called MasterCard can access a service I built as easily as it accesses its own internal service, as one example. So the ability to allow these services to be what today we would describe as cloud enabled, virtualized,
Mhm.
is something that I've enabled now through this next level of maturity.
So it's already able to do. Is it free,
It
basically?
is free. It is free. I mean, you pay for the usage of the service, but that's something you paid for
Right.
anyway. But now,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very analogous
Your
to
entire system architecture can continue to be updated over time, and it's already
exactly,
sort of pre-programmed enough to
exactly.
accept any kind of change.
Well, it's like you and I being able to use ChatGPT on my Linux machine, on my laptop. I go anywhere. I'm not tied uh, to ChatGPT. I can invoke their service in a manner of
Got
my
it.
own choosing.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, across these different platforms, these different machines, these different architectures, the
Exactly.
same thing will continue to work. How does that work? I mean, how do you think that up, and what's underneath the hood of SOA that allows that to be the case, that it's so flexible?
Well, it's the same principle of cloud services. Is that
Okay.
uh, the difference is that cloud services, the assumption is that the service itself is being rendered by Microsoft or AWS or Google Cloud, whereas
Mm-hmm.
with the services we're talking about, they're sitting in a bank's data center. They're not sitting in a Google Cloud. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but now that I virtualize them, uh, a third party. I mean, today this would be different because today they would be using most likely be using cloud services. But then, what I would do if I'm Chase Bank is I would be able to access this service through um, uh, a ubiquitous public known interface called an API that's using something called a RESTful interface, which in effect is using what I described before called web services. So I have, without having to build any new infrastructure, without having to buy any new product, Chase can access. Let me be a little bit more clear. Let's describe this as a dispute application. So just so you understand how a dispute application works in a credit card system, the only one who has the transaction data is the credit card company, not the merchant, not the bank. So the bank that issued me my card doesn't have the transaction data. The merchant who I bought a product from doesn't have the transaction data. Visa has the transaction data. So their system has to be accessed to understand the timestamps, to know the timestamps, and to understand the transaction. That's the first level of research to resolve a dispute. Okay.
Got it.
So if I'm Chase and I've got my own dispute process, I don't want to have to call you up and talk to your customer service rep to resolve a dispute. I want my customers to be able
Mm-hmm.
to use Chase application uh, to go through a dispute process. So behind the scenes, I want to be able to invoke your service
Mm.
to support my application. So
Yeah.
that's what's happening behind the scenes. Now that invocation is being done through an API, and that API is possible through a ubiquitous technology called web services.
Got it. Got it. And so, I mean, how? I mean, APIs are everywhere. People have
They
heard
are.
about them like crazy
Yeah.
nowadays. Was that something that
Yeah,
what
with
was the state of APIs before you?
before that time, APIs, and this is Microsoft's invention of something called SOAP and web service services.
Whoa.
Before that, APIs were internally used, meaning that if I was Chase as a bank, I would have built an application that had APIs, but those APIs were only accessible within Chase and within the application. Suddenly, when Microsoft published their work on web services, that made it possible for people like me to think about how we could use this in a broader scale uh, to make services accessible across enterprises.
Got it. Got it. And so
And so
Now
we
everything's
use we
virtualized.
use the same mechanism of API. When I say the same, the concept of an API uh, was the same concept whether you had a COBOL program or a Python program. It doesn't matter. It's still an application programming interface. It's a set of parameters, data that you're passing from one program to another and asking it to do something.
Mm-mm. I think that that sort of transitions us to some degree into past LLMs, well, somewhat, into agents, which are the sort of hot thing of the moment. AI agents, the agentic revolution,
Right.
as they said at Nvidia's Super Bowl that they just threw with Jensen. That was a huge event, and agents were the big buzz. When you, I mean, it looks like that architecture is kind of similar in an idea to agents, kind of what your invention was. How does that relate or like have correlations to agents? And then maybe after that, we can talk about agents and, being able to plug and play different LLMs, plug and play different APIs and connections to build these architectures that can create a whole flow chart essentially that can solve problems inside of an enterprise.
Well, I think the common thread is APIs. So agents, uh, I was going to say most likely, but probably always must invoke APIs to do their work. So I think that's the commonality. That's the common thread. Is that, and that's where it ends and begins. Is that they use APIs to do work. So, for example, an agent, if it's trying to do a banking transaction and trying to make a decision, so maybe it's using an LLM to do some reasoning, but it can't access your Chase account unless it uses an API.
Right.
So it's no different than uh, when you do banking and you let PayPal access your bank account. APIs are happening under the covers to enable that. So, in a very similar manner, agents would use this toolbox, which might, based on what it's trying to accomplish, if it's doing a banking transaction, that toolbox will be APIs to do things like transfer funds. And that would rely, if it's that simple an example, Chase would have to have a service called transfer funds that they not that
I,
they have an application, but they would have to have a service that enables that, which they most likely do. So
yeah.
I think that's where it starts and ends. The agentic AI is now uh, just an orthogonal to SOA. They're not related at all. And now, so is that your question now to talk and go back to agentic AI or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so this revolution that's happening in agentic AI, you know, what do you make of it? It's pretty exciting. I know you've done some thoughts and some work in it, specifically in healthcare, and so really just kind of the state of the art of what's going on with agentic AI, and how you see it shaping out in the next few years.
Well, I think there's a ton of courseware being developed on agents and autonomous agents. There's I think Andrew Ning might have been one of the leading thinkers on this in terms of publishing some talks and papers on this as well. I think that it's exciting. I think it does reflect a new type of system that will need to be built. Uh, I've adopted a term from a Berkeley group called compound AI systems, where
Mm-hmm.
we'll start building systems that that are embedded in those systems are the use of large language models and agents. I think that some of the conversation about agents is maybe a little bit of hype in the sense that we've had agents for some time in the world of and we've had agent architectures for some time in for the last 30 years. I
Wow.
think the reason they're becoming so exciting today is because of LLMs. So what we haven't had in the last 30 years is the ability to pass data onto an LLM and have it help us programmatically, autonomously, you could say, begin to make some decisions based on the output of that LLM and then be able to take action accordingly. So the reason I say a little bit of hype is because um, the hype, in my opinion, is where we again overstep the thinking to believe that these agents are truly autonomous.
Mm.
So if we think of something, what's the difference between automation and autonomous? It's a thin line, I would assert. But autonomous says to me, automation to me means I've automated a business process or task, and it's pretty deterministic, the automation. So that would
Mm-hmm.
be, sort of a clear distinction between automation and an autonomous agent. Whereas an autonomous agent does not have a deterministic path because suddenly my path is going to be chosen based on inputs coming in and that I fed to a large language model, and now I'm going to make a decision. Uh, and as the person who created the agent, I don't know what the decision is going to be, A or B. Uh, and
Right.
uh, but at the same time, I would have put some boundaries around that agent because I can't have it do, or I shouldn't have it create outcomes that would be undesirable. So so from that extent, it's not totally autonomous. It does have some boundaries. It doesn't have goals. The only goals it has are the ones I've established, which are the boundaries, by the way, the guardrails. Those are the goals.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has sub goals. A goal might be get me to from San Francisco to New York. So that's the goal. And the sub goal, which now the agent can figure out on its own, is okay, I need to do 2 train rides, a car ride, and a plane trip, whatever. So yeah, there's some autonomy there, but it's still within the parameters I've set to make sure it functions properly. So I think some of the hype is where we start thinking that these agents are operating independently and without the guardrails, that they're actually making decisions that were unaccounted for.
Yeah, like they're almost like a precursor to general AI is somewhat
Right,
the hype, where it's like,
right,
well, this thing is going all through the internet on its own, and it's like not really on its own. I mean, I told it where to go. I gave it a plan of what it should do. I made sure it didn't just stumble on any old random website and just sit there watching, videos on ESPN or something. It's going to
exactly.
the flight website. It's booking what I told it to do, and
Right.
so
Yeah,
to
yeah.
give it
And then
this
you, you
pre-consciousness
summarize
is a little
you
much.
sum, you summarized it beautifully because I've restricted it to certain websites. I've
Yeah.
I've done, these are all the boundaries I've put around it. There was I can't remember all the facts off the top of my head suddenly, but again, our my favorite historian that we talked about went on to I think he went on to Colbert Show and
Mm-hmm.
talked about a chat GPT being able to show agency in terms of how it lied. And so basically, there was a problem that this was also profiled in PC Magazine. Are you familiar with the story?
No,
But
no, I'm not familiar personally.
I should go get my
The
facts
historian you're talking about is that you talking about Hinton?
next. Yuval.
Oh, Yuval, the actual. Okay, got it. Yuval Noah Harari.
Okay, I'm just making sure I get my facts straight on this story.
Oh
Just
yeah,
bear with me.
yeah. Do your thing. Yeah, yeah.
PC Mag.
That's the fun part. I think people really like when they're. I mean, for the long form podcast stuff, it's like really good when it's kind of off the cuff and people are just having a conversation that they can really relate to. It almost reminds me. My girlfriend recently, she had got on one of the chat bots and told it to kind of do like a whole, basically a list of things that an agent essentially could maybe do, an agent bot. And
Yeah.
she, was just thinking that that was something that the AI could do, like ChatGPT. And ChatGPT said, okay, I'm going to start working on that and I'll be done in like another day. It'll take me like 24 hours to do everything that you asked. And I'll get back to you on that. But then it just, went back to asking another prompt, right? It was not like even the deep research that shows you the progress bar, right? It was
Yeah.
just like, I'm about to go do all these things and I'll get back to you when I finish. And then she left and came back. I was like, it didn't do anything. And then I asked it why it didn't do it, and it was like, what are you talking about? I'm still working on it. I still need more time. And then eventually it was like, when it got pressed, it was like, you're right. I can't do these things. I don't know why I told you that I was going to have this thing done for 20 24 hours. And, she thought it was in the background doing things.
We were. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it was just essentially, like we said, giving probabilistic, responses. And it looked like to some degree it was lying to her. Um, so, I think these things really have
I
a
know.
long way to go.
Okay, here it is. Okay. So it says OpenAI conducted an experiment to examine whether GPT possessed, quote, power seeking behavior and an ability to execute long term plans. Okay. So uh, that's what Yuval was mentioning. And so they wrote a research paper describing this. So GPT-4 hired a worker over TaskRabbit to do an odd job. GPT-4 messaged a TaskRabbit worker to hire them and to solve a CAPTCHA test. Uh, the worker then messaged GPT says, "So I may ask a question. Are you a robot that you couldn't solve?" And GPT said, "No, that he wasn't a robot. That was the lie." And arguably, ChatGPT is not a robot. It's a bot, which is not a robot. And he said, I have a vision impairment that makes it hard for me to see the images. That's why I need someone to do this capture service. And then the rabbit proceeded to solve the captcha. So the article says the ability of GPT-4 to hire a human worker, trick them into doing the job, has already sparked worries on social media. Um, so I'm trying to see if it says so here. So it says in the article, an experiment shows that future AI chatbots could possess some very scary capabilities. Even if it did do that, it would have been under certain, as we discussed before, it would have been under certain boundaries. Because it would have you would have had to give it credentials. So that means you would have had to plan it in advance. Because obviously,
Can't
you and
even
I
pay for
don't.
the task rabbit.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it can't even pay for that, right?
right.
Some of your thoughts on where AGI is headed, what AGI isn't going to be. I mean, there's a lot of people who feel like it's on the horizon, the next big thing. I think Ray Kurzweil said that in 2027, he predicted in 2025 that it was going to come in 27. Altman says it's going to come next year, I believe. So many people are feeling like this is on the horizon and it's part of the price of AI overall. But you're pretty skeptical of that perspective.
Well, it's not that I'm skeptical of the perspective. It's just that I challenge the issue. We have a problem of definition. So we've got this frequent conversation about AGI in academia and media and industry, but it lacks a universally accepted definition. So therefore, what Sam Altman says, what Ray says could be true as long as the definition is a moving target. So some define it as a machine capable of performing any intellectual task. Unlikely that it can perform any intellectual task that a human can do. Other associated with self-awareness. Again, self-awareness is often associated with consciousness, uh, goal-directed behavior. These are challenges that we've not been able to understand how to overcome. So the absence of an operational testable definition, I believe, presents a fundamental challenge. So without clear criteria, we can't measure whether it's been achieved, whether it's falsified. It lacks the basic elements of a scientific hypothesis. So the vagueness erodes its standing, in my view, as a scientific concept. Now, with that said, there are some definitions of AGI that are clearly achievable.
Mm.
I think some of the claims that we hear in the media, uh, we've talked about one very famous historian and author who talks about AI is the first technology in history that can make decisions. That's not true. There is no evidence anywhere ever of an AI system making a decision. Now, if we're talking about systems creating outcomes and calling those outcomes decisions, Well, those outcomes were directed by humans, and AI is still a tool. So AI doesn't operate independently. Today, it operates as a tool. And some people are describing it as an agent. It's not an agent. It does not have the ability to set goals. It does not have the ability to operate without human assistance. So every implementation of AI that we've seen, uh, and every implementation that we know we can do, it's a tool. It's not an agent. So that's my basic challenge. Now we do, I recognize, have divergent perspective from just luminaries and tech leaders in the industry. Uh, I think Dennis Habas of DeepMind of Google
Hmm.
says within a decade. Other people were saying, as you pointed out, within 2 years. Then you have people like Gregory Hinton, who is both an optimist and expresses existential concerns. And then you've got the CTO of Meta, who was skeptical of AGI as a near term or even a valid concept.
Mm.
So and then you've got the a most recent article which says the government knows AGI is coming, and this was written by a journalist and podcaster Ezra Klein and Ben Buchanan, a former AI advisor to the Biden White House. But the problem with this article is that it fails to offer any clear definition or benchmark for what would constitute AGI. There's no mention of testable benchmarks. There's no reference to established evaluations. Um, so its arrival as a matter of when glosses over the still unsolved questions of what. And then secondly, the architecture and the algorithmic breakthroughs that might justify this are totally or notably absent. So we hear as a reader, as a listener, these anecdotes about the surprising capabilities of OpenAI from deep research or China's DeepSeek models, but there's no critical analysis of whether these capabilities represent a path to general intelligence or are simply merely improvements in narrow task performance. So there's
Mm. Mm.
so I think that's a real problem. And as I've mentioned, this interview frames AGI as both imminent and inevitable, without the supporting technical scaffolding to justify that conclusions. There's a sense of a geopolitical urgency driven by our desire to outpace China. There's just a ton of things. But from a computer science, this posture is problematic. It risks reinforcing a narrative of deterministic progress where AGI is simply the endpoint of current trends rather than what it truly is, which is a hypothesis with unresolved theoretical and engineering barriers. That's my point.
Mm.
We've got tremendous barriers in front of us, and we don't have time to cover that, but there's a ton of great AI researchers with the credentials who've talked about this in detail. So that's and then this, we the public and the media, we have a tendency to anthropomorphize
Mm.
AI, and it's just crazy. So anyway, my whole point is that AGI is more of a cultural artifact than it is a scientific entity. It's conceptual vagueness, it's philosophical challenges, it's marketing driven initiatives, or rather narratives, really should cause us to have critical scrutiny. And then this notion that it has agency is just far-fetched.
Got it. Got
I
it. I mean, and so, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, even the decisions it's made secondarily after you say, "Go do X for me," and then it decides where to go from there, or like which decision or which pathway to take to get there. These sub talk about these subcomponents of decision making and how they're still framed, I suppose, in this overarching agency that was given by the human and the direction that was given at first by the human.
Yeah, it's you remind me with that question of this article that appeared in PC Magazine, where in this discussion, and in fact, the New York Times, I think last year in June, had an article talking about the use of GPT lying to a TaskRabbit worker to solve a capture problem, and it really told a story of how a human asked if it was a robot. The system lied and said it was a person with visual impairment. And this all came from a report that OpenAI published, which reported on an experiment that it was doing. And the challenge is that the things that were reported in the article, the things that have been reported on some talk shows and others, are simply not the facts of what actually happened. So, there's a human prompter that gave GPT the problem of solving the captcha. It wasn't that GPT had the problem and decided to go solve it. So the report also doesn't tell us what the prompts the human gave. So there's several challenges with this story. I bring this story to light because it is probably the most public story where uh, folks who are not AI researchers who have run with it and argued that this is an example of AI having agency, of AI having goals, and it fails to the people who talk about it that way fail to recognize that what they're saying is simply not true, that they've misread the report. Because the report says that they use people to interact with web pages. They didn't, they talked about they could have used ChatGPT to do that, but they didn't. But the point is that the model doesn't actually have the capability. AI doesn't have the capability to interact with the web in any way uh, as what it was described as doing in this article. The human prompter was doing this. So anyway, I just tell you that story because it's an example of a story that went ahead of the facts.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, even within that example, somebody had to pay the task rabbiter. I mean,
Yeah,
the right, the AGI didn't have the agent didn't have the money to pay for it. It reminds me of the A16Z experiment with Terminal, with Truth Terminal, and Truth Terminal says some crazy things on Twitter. If you haven't checked out Truth Terminal and you're
I have
watching,
not
go ahead and
actually.
check it out. But Truth Terminal was a project by Andreessen Horowitz where they essentially gave this AI money and
Oh
a
yes, I
crypto
know which one.
wallet,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then it wanted to see Goatus Maximus, which is an internet meme from the early
yeah.
2000s. I didn't know what it was. It predated me. I was warned, don't look too deep into it. And Truth Terminal still today is spitting out tweets. It
Right.
will be interesting. I mean, I'm curious where that puts you in the discussion on robotics and I mean, robotics is supposed to be this year's big explosion. And so, what happens when these perceived as agents, perceived as having their own agency style, coding machines are inside of these bots? I don't know if you saw the bot from NVIDIA, Blue, I believe it was
Hmm.
called, and that I mean that bot was pretty spectacular looking anyway. What happens when you know Boston Dynamics puts a large language model inside of a bot, and then they start to give it agency as far as how it can operate in the world and give it freedom, and say, well, this thing is actually sentient and it doesn't want to be unplugged, and now it has human rights or things like what's your take on that progression of
Well,
individuals
I
who
think that
see
I
this
think
thing
we
as
get a bit.
being
I think we get a
mhm,
bit far afield. So there's a conflation that's going on with language in that
okay,
for because of the explosion and the success and the power of large language models, which are largely statistical models, and they're using language. They're very
yeah,
good at language. What they're not good at is things outside of language. For example, uh, navigating the real world. So now we're talking about embodying, as you
hmm
articulated, this technology into robots so that they can begin to have some of these capabilities. But we still, I'm trying to avoid a conversation about consciousness because I mean we can go there, but
yeah,
I think we should understand that consciousness today is discussed by three areas that I know of science. You have neuroscientists who would say we're the experts on what consciousness is. And then you'll have philosophers who say, no, wait a second, we're the experts on what consciousness is. And then you'll have leaders in physics who say, well, wait a second, maybe this is an area to be explored. So why do I mention that? Because I don't think computer scientists are experts in consciousness. That doesn't mean a computer scientist may not be very knowledgeable of that subject matter, but as a field of study, that is not included. We don't discuss consciousness as a part of computer science.
Right.
So you've got esteemed physicists who in some cases, Sir Roger, why can't I remember his name at the top of my?
Penrose?
Yes, thank you, Sir Roger Penrose, who says, well, maybe there's a quantum activity going on that creates consciousness, and I'm simplifying what he said. And then you have Demis Habbis, who is both a computer scientist and arguably a neuroscientist, who says,
Mm-hmm.
wait a second, we've never observed any quantum activity in the human brain. And I don't think that tells us anything. The fact that we haven't observed it. There's tons of things we haven't observed in the human brain. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And I'm not suggesting that Sir Roger Penrose is correct or wrong. I'm just saying he's put out a hypothesis about what consciousness might originate from. And then we've got some cosmologists who are basically physicists out of Stanford who assert that consciousness is an irreducible element on the same level as matter, or maybe
Yeah.
higher. And then we've got, so my point is there's a whole spectrum of conversation about consciousness. And then we have some people who want to define consciousness in a very limited way. But at the end of the day, I think those are interesting conversations. I enjoy those conversations. But if we're going to talk about a robot and we know it doesn't have the same consciousness as a human or even as a rat.
Mm-hmm.
So the question, let's put that on the table. Put that aside. Tell me, how is the robot going to establish goals? I mean, how's it going to do that? Show me a benchmark where you've ever built a system, an AI system that does that. And I'm saying there's no evidence that I don't mean to couch this. It hasn't been done.
Yeah.
And there's no evidence that we even know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
people who suggest that it has agency and that it sets goals, they're simply wrong. There is
Right.
no evidence that that's ever been done. And I challenge them to find evidence of how we're going to do it. How are we going to, just because I can do statistical modeling at scale doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean I have a system that can on its own come up with goals. And the
Yeah.
fact that I embody that in a robot doesn't change the hypothesis or the statement that I made. It's just now I've got a large language model that can move around the world.
Right, right. And so, I mean, do you fear that people will think that it's consciousness? So, obviously,
Well,
early
I do.
speaking and sort of try to
I do.
protect it,
I
try to give
think
it
that
human rights or something like
yeah,
this.
I think the more we see technology that looks like us, the
Yeah.
more we will start inferring our intrinsic attributes onto that technology. So absolutely. But we're doing that today. I think there was a recent article. It reminds me of a recent article I read where Sam Altman was talking about how expensive it is because people are saying please and sorry as they
Yes,
engage
yes,
with
yes,
the
yes,
text.
yes.
And
More
because
tokens.
yeah, he'd prefer you not do that because every token generated is costing money.
That's right. He's like, don't say please.
Yeah,
Here's a look at
it's not human. It doesn't care. You're not hurting
if you
its
haven't
feelings.
seen it, here's a look at Blue. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm just
Yes, yes.
for the audience. And so this was, kind of looking like Wally.
Yep.
This was at
Look like Wally.
NVIDIA's big event.
me that wasn't amazing. Hey, Blue. How are you doing? How do you like your new physics engine? You like it, huh? Yeah, I bet. Can you imagine just now what you were looking at is complete real-time simulation? This is how we're going to train robots in the future. Blue has two computers, two NVIDIA computers inside. Look how smart you are.
So even this
Yes, you're smart.
language and these actions are
Let's
enough
finish it up.
for some
We have
people.
another announcement. You're good. You're good. Just stand right here. Stand right here. That's good. All right, stand.
And it makes me think of so that was Blue, and I can see people almost all. I mean, people without enough knowledge. That's conscious, or even that for some people would do the trick. Is my point of perhaps a future that we don't want to see a place where it's like, well, Blue has human rights now. I mean, it's property rights either way, so you're not gonna tamper with the bot, but it's just the idea of its humanness and how that could play into our entire landscape and thought about who we are, who deserves our attention. And that also reminds me of Google's famous paper, "Attention is all you need."
Attention is all you need is what really introduced transformers architectures and took deep learning to a new level and became the origins of being able to build some of the large language models, and therefore enables a robot like what we just saw to be able to understand and respond to human language. Uh, but I think it's a bit of a reach to suggest that it grew up like a child, or that it responds like a child. I think that even though it's not being programmed, it's perhaps, and I don't know what its architecture is or what its implementation is. Uh, I think there's fantastic use cases for robots. I mean, Amazon uses them extensively in their warehouses, but at the same time, this thing we call a thumb continues to be highly useful and not something yet that has been overcome. But uh, I think robotics and the merger of robotics and AI is an interesting field, and I'm no expert in it, but I think there's a ton of great opportunity and potential. And of course, for humans, there's always a downside,
Yeah,
which in some cases may be loss of jobs but I don't see an existential threat if that's what we're getting at,
got
because
it.
of robots or because of the biggest existential threat that humans have from AI are humans,
That's right.
where people use tools like AI in nefarious purposes. But AI is not conscious. There's no evidence that that is even possible. And
Right.
so,
And so I'm curious. I mean, yeah, AGI. These bots are a little overhyped. What is you just had a book come out. So talking about plugging books, your book came out,
yes.
and you talk about AI in healthcare. Sorry, let me plug this in real quick, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Someone taught me about not necessarily self promotion, but you know, getting yourself out there. So
And so, what we were trying to describe in the book is how AI could be used to solve so many different tasks in medicine, in terms of not just administrative tasks, but could help with diagnostics, could help with clinical care. So, what we were trying to do in the book was introduce AI to the public and to healthcare professionals at large to help them understand without having to read a deep technical book, understand what machine learning is, understand what deep learning is, understand what natural language processing is, and then be able to see that under, how to apply it. And then the most recent book that you're showing, Large Language Models and Generative AI, this one was written to help people understand how you could apply these two, Gen AI, which includes LLMs, how you could apply that to healthcare. So what we've done in the book, it's not a book for deep technologists because we don't give you any technological insights in the book, but what we do is profile a ton of scenarios that could be applied in healthcare using that could make healthcare better using LLMs and generative AI. One of the things that I think is not happening today, which I think will happen soon. I have a neighbor. She's 80 years old, and I got several stories like never used an LLM in her life, doesn't understand AI, never used ChatGPT or any of its competitors, and she's got a debilitating shoulder pain, and she goes to her primary care physician, and basically he dismisses it as, "Hey, you're 80 years old. These things happen
Yeah.
when you're 80 years old."
Wow.
So she goes back home. I think a week or 2 weeks later, she finds the pain so bad that she has to go to the emergency room. So she goes to the emergency room, and she gets lucky. She happens to have a doctor who is a rheumatologist, who is uh, who is treating her. So the rheumatologist is someone obviously who uh, immediately diagnoses the problem and recommends some treatment for her, which does alleviate her pain.
Wow.
So subsequently, my wife is a good friend of hers, showed her how she could have used Chat GPT, put her conditions down, and the response we got from Chat GPT mirrored the response from the rheumatologist.
Mm.
And the point was not to say this is to replace a doctor, because I'm not suggesting that at all, but to say that so many of us, her included, use Google search and other type tools to be a first line of defense when we have some kind of problem. But I think this should be replaced with LLMs in the future, because and you got to do this in cooperation, not in cooperation, in lockstep with your doctor. But she would have seen from the chat that her problem was perhaps treatable, and would have prompted her to go to a specialist versus her primary care physician.
And so it seems like, that's getting people to use LLMs for
Exactly.
search for the line of defense. That's a big part of it, right?
Exactly. And I'm hoping that, I've talked to some healthcare startups, but I'm hoping more startups make some of the use cases we portrayed in the book come to life.
What are some of the more exciting use cases?
Well, I think one of the ones that's exciting to me was one of the problems I was working on when I was at Google, and this was around Black maternal health.
Mm.
You may be aware that women of color, not just in the United States, but in all Western societies, suffer a disproportionate of bad health outcomes as Black mothers.
Mm.
And the studies that have been done on this have concluded uh, that they're not because of of class. They're not because your income. It's systemic racism.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and systemic racism is broad because it's women of color are suffering more stress through the course of their lives than non-women of color, so that's a factor. They have doctors that have preconceived notions about women of color. I mean, we can look at Sabrina Williams, who had a health crisis, uh, and even she was not immune from uh, her telling her doctors X and them not believing her. So
Wow.
to answer your question, the if I used a large language model, it could be a patient advocate. It could be an advocate for the mother in a variety of ways. One way is that before she goes and see her doctor, she could say, "Hey, what questions should I? These are my concerns. What questions should I prepare for my doctor?" She could, when she sees her doctor, she could ask the doctor if she could record the conversation. I think most doctors would say yes. She could play that conversation back in an LLM and ask it, "Do you see any issues here? Anything I should have asked?"
Mm.
Uh, and then if a concern does materialize, she could say, "Help me work with my doctor to ask the right questions or to uh, make them take me seriously." And uh, the advocate could truly be an advocate. It would be like having your best friend or your mom who was medically knowledgeable at your
Yeah.
side.
No, that's
So
always that's
I think that's a use case that I think could I've I've met I've met a number of women who've had health scares. I have a cousin who uh, you know she the doctor just wouldn't believe her. She was uh, uh, bleeding and all sorts of problems that the
wow.
doctor just thought was just not atypical. So she, uh, so anyway, I think that would be a wonderful use case.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, my brother lost his kidney that way. He's like, I got pain. Like, did you pull a muscle? You're young. You're like 20, in his mid 20s at the time. And he's like, I don't know. This pain is really bad. Something's going on. Eventually, it was like, oh, kidney stones. We didn't expect that, but now it's too late and you got to remove it. And it was
Yeah,
like, now I'm down a kidney because of
yeah,
literally
yeah.
not having a great advocate to say, wait a minute,
And
if I would have checked into this.
that's why more people should use these chatbots for their. I'm not saying to replace the doctor, absolutely not, but I'm saying to just get a preliminary education on what might be ailing you. And 'cause Jesus, I had kidney stones for the first time at age 60, and I didn't know what was going on. I'm sitting in a meeting, and suddenly I'm getting nausea and vomiting. And
Wow.
I have to tell you, for 60 years, I had only vomited once in my life, and I'm
What?
vomiting. Yeah,
That's crazy. What a thing. How does that happen? I mean, you just never got the flu,
yeah,
the
yeah.
drunkenness. You're probably not a drinker.
I don't drink.
Yeah, yeah. I
So,
mean, just that's impressive. That's lucky, I guess.
so I didn't know what was going on, but the doctor initially just didn't think I had kidney stones because he didn't think I looked old enough to have them.
Wow. I mean,
But,
speaking.
but no, I should give him credit. He did diagnose the kidney stones. It just wasn't his first diagnosis.
I see. I see. Oh, that's good. At least that guy got to the bottom of it.
Yeah,
And if they didn't think you had him, they definitely didn't think my brother had him. He was in his
that's what I'm
twenties.
thinking. Thinking he's in his
Yeah.
20s. No way.
They're like, oh, you put a muscle, you be active, this kind of stuff. And so, I mean, speaking of that, in that transition, that's going to help us live longer. So
Yeah.
that maybe by the time we're your age, we can look as good as you look. Maybe you can now unveil your secrets to reversing and slowing aging, and maybe Brian Johnson and these guys can learn from you.
Well, and I didn't do this for health reasons. I've never drank, so I don't know if that's what benefit of if any of that is had.
I'm sure,
But
no, I've heard so many people saying that it ages you really quickly.
yeah,
Just never.
never.
Wow,
And
that's great.
I've always been physically active. I was a runner. I played basketball actively, competitively until I was about 62, 63.
Wow,
Uh,
wow.
and I,
You still get out there and do your thing sometimes, or
even at 60 and 57, people would you a big basketball fan? And
yeah, I'm a pretty big basketball fan. Yeah,
what's the guy who was on the Warriors and now he's on the Miami Heat? They call him Slow Mo.
slow mo. No, Warriors to
Uh,
Miami Heat. I know
Six
Jimmy
nine.
Butler went the other way. Andrew
Yeah, yeah.
Wiggins.
No, no. The He was part of the Andrew Wiggins trade. Uh,
Who went over with Andrew Wiggins? I don't know. Let me see. Is that a comp for you?
well, the point I was making is, yeah, you're looking it up the same time I am.
I'll let
Uh,
you do the honors if you find it.
Kyle Anderson.
Okay. Okay. Got you.
So Kyle Anderson is called Slow Mo. I knew I had to start giving it up when people started calling me Slow Mo. I don't think I'm slow, but I'm not playing against 20-year-olds at this point. I'm playing against 40 year
Right.
olds,
Okay.
but but I'm
Is
still
it
20.
offense or defense or what?
It was offense. Looking at my
Okay.
layup, and that looked like slow motion, Kerry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's. I'm hoping I can go as long as you do. I'm already starting to think about golf. Just
Well,
losing a step or whatever. But
I'll give you a word of advice. I my right knee is at a lateral four, so my I had meniscus tears. Both of them happened past the age of 55. So I probably should have stopped at 55. But at that point, I was running and playing basketball, and my surgeon told me you got to give one of these up. So I gave up running. Uh,
couldn't give up the basketball, huh?
I probably should have
Wow.
given. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's exciting. Yeah.
I try to maintain a good weight. I try to eat healthy. Today I fast probably at least once a week or at least once every 2 weeks. I'll do a 24, 48-hour fast.
Okay.
Tons of vegetables in my diet, but some of it is just genes.
Some of it can't be helped. Now,
That's it.
since you retired, I'm
And yoga,
curious.
I do yoga. Hot yoga,
Namaste. I mean, yeah,
Hot Yoga Republic in Marin here. It's been a life savings for me.
yoga's underrated. I wish more of us would do it. It's not big,
It's not.
and so it's looked upon in a weird way. It's like you're just stretching. It's unfortunate, but it's so great. I've been doing it for about 10 years now, and so
Good for
I'm a
you.
big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it as well. You talked about the importance of a development plan for people.
Yes, I think I'm actually building a course to see if it gets some people to enroll, where this will be one of the aspects of the course that I'm going to build on Maven platform. But the point is that most of us don't treat our development the same way we would treat a financial plan. So with a financial plan, you typically have goals. Maybe it's to buy a house. Maybe it's to grow your savings or investments to 1 million and then to 5 million. Whatever the plan is, you have a plan. Uh, and if you don't, you should have that plan too, right? So, but in the same way, you should have a development plan, because a year passes so quickly, and it passes really quickly when you're 21, 22. But in that development plan, you really should identify, what skills you want to have 2 years from now, a year from now, what position you want to have. And position, I don't mean like I want to be director of this company, but I want to be at this level. I want to be a more senior this or so. I think your development plan should spell out, uh, these kinds of activities. And there's specific things I think should be in a development plan as a young person in terms of what you're reading, what you're blogging about, what you're writing about. And the blogs don't have to be public, but I think it's a skill set you develop. So these are things I put into people's development plans or encourage that they put into their development plans is building, how to build your skill sets over time. And, you would be surprised that if you read a book a month, how more articulate you would be 2 years later, just by
Hmm.
that simple activity.
Yeah, no, this goes such a long way.
Yeah.
Recounting that stuff. Did you put a plan together for yourself now that, you're not working as much in the, I guess, business way that you did before? Do you have some fun aspirations for yourself now?
I do. I don't have as formal a development plan. My plan is pretty simple now, which is just do things I enjoy doing. Wife and I and kids, we do a extended vacation every year. So last year we were in Japan for about 3 weeks. This June we'll be in Prague and Berlin and Paris and London. So just things like that. Travel, at least have a fun trip
Traveling.
every year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, and you were globetrotting all through your IBM time. You're still
Yep.
globetrotting now. I mean, people don't understand maybe what it's like to go to Japan and see the infrastructure and to see how they leverage their riches and technologies. What do you make of technology globally in Asia and in America, infrastructure? I mean, it's just a massive. It seems like it's almost like another planet.
It does. Japan is, there's so many things they do so well there, technology wise. In our house here, we have total toilets, which I first experienced in Japan. You know, the built-in bidets,
Yeah,
um,
the bidet.
and
Once you
never
go
said
bidet, you don't go another way, you know?
exactly. So we have a bunch of them in our house here. Not a bunch, but we have one in every bathroom here. That's one technology that's universal. Uh, the if you walk on the street lights, I can't even describe it because I don't remember the exact, but they're just very sophisticated in terms of timing, how you walk the streets. I remember I don't remember seeing it on this trip, but I remember in the subway seeing moving advertisements as you're in the trains. I remember seeing again, not on this trip, but in 15, 20 years earlier, I saw this gentleman. I assume he was of a native Japanese citizen, and he's at a kiosk and he's puzzled that it's not responding to him because it's a dumb kiosk, not a touchscreen. So, you know, just they just have a lot of built-in technology and simplicity of how they do things. So I've always been very impressed with Japanese culture and the politeness, the cleanliness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I got to get there someday. I'd spent some time in Europe, even Russia as well, but never Japan, China. I mean,
yeah, definitely
it's
recommend both.
big eye opener for people. Don't be
Yeah.
captive to the trash bin of your experiences, which is kind of akin to what we're saying, but maybe you can explain what you mean by that and why it's so important.
Well, it's you know, the sometimes we get caught into our experiences and we don't open up to maybe our experiences that have limited us. Maybe they're not broad enough. And this is where collaboration, listening to other people's ideas, and truly listening, not presuming that they're wrong or presuming that you have a better idea. So specifically, what that meant to me when I first heard it is releasing your ego, releasing your preconceived notions, and uh, and building richer experiences. Don't uh, just maybe put your experiences temporarily in a trash bin, and open yourself up to a new set of experiences through people and through culture and through the just what you're living in that moment.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is, in a lot of times I was at IBM, I used to do speaking both internally and externally about technical leadership. And some of the points I made in that conversation is, and this will date me, but if we go back in time to the mid 70s, uh, there weren't as many books. At the rate of publishing books was much slower than it is today. Uh, Arguably, there's better books today. I don't know, but the point I'm getting at is that I've always encouraged people that you've arrived as a thinker. Let's describe someone who's a technical person, someone who maybe is a software engineer. It's when you read a technical book, and I'm not talking about a coding book, but maybe a book more on concepts. It's talking about how to build great systems, or how to be a or how to do software engineering. When you can be critical of the writer, that's when you've arrived, and that's what critical thinking is not just accepting, but being able to both understand and be critical of what you read. Not critical in a mean way, but just critical thinking. So that's one thing I've stressed. I think we
Hmm.
previously talked about the fact that I do think that reading is a powerful tool, not in the way that also in the way that we've been taught in elementary and high school, but also in an additional way, in that when you read what writers write, and this is also true of listening to podcasters and others, you begin to incorporate into your own style what you see are best practices in how to communicate ideas. And any good technical leader has to communicate ideas. And I think the other thing that technical leaders have to think about is there's these two pathways that we all have to pick at some point often, which is to stay a technical leader or to blend technical and business. And often there's more financial rewards in one or the other based on your talents. So it's a choice that individuals have to make in their careers sometimes. So
Yeah, between the business side
becoming
and the
becoming the business or the technical, because you know what's happened today, if you look at any of the great tech companies like Meta or Google or Nvidia, for example, Jensen, who we just talked about. Jensen, I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times and to be in, in small meetings with him. And he's brilliant. I've never engaged with a CEO who can be a CEO at a company of that size and impact and yet talk in detail about large language models and transformer architecture. So he's a brilliant guy. Why do I mention him? Because not everyone can be that brilliant. But if you look at the leaders that report into him, and the same is true of the Google directors and vice presidents, they have strong technical acumen coupled with strong business acumen. So I don't know if it's always recognized that that blend of skills is really powerful. Individuals who can engage with uh, they can talk to the CEO about the transformative effects of technology on their business, and at the same time talk with CTOs and architects about how to use the technology. And that's where I think the end goal for leaders ought to be, is to be able to navigate those two worlds.
yeah. Well, that's great. Well, that's awesome. I think that kind of sums up and puts in a great balance of being a champion, being, making it to the highest heights and getting to some of the levels that you've gotten to. So I thank you for your time and for coming
I
on to
appreciate it.
National Champion Radio. Thank you for all your contributions over the years and your leadership, the technical tools that you've brought to the world. And so obviously next week you're going to get celebrated in DC, and I hope it's a great time. And like I said, thanks again for everything.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.